So now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Shrey Vazir. He graduated from our kinesiology program in 2015. For those watching, Shrey might not need an introduction because he's been leading our Mindful Fridays for about, like 4 years now.
Four,
But for
yeah.
those, yeah, 4 or 5, it's been a long time. And the regular Friday series is coming back. We're starting those tomorrow at 12:15 Eastern, and that information will be in the email that you're getting this evening. So if you really liked what you watched this evening and you are thinking, yes, I want to do some mindfulness, we'll have the link for you so you can join us every week for the next 10 weeks. So if you're not familiar with Shrey, he is a registered physiotherapist, as I said before, a mindfulness meditation facilitator, and the founder of Mind Body Horizons. He's also an educator specializing in chronic pain, stress management, and employee well-being. With his advanced training in mindfulness-based chronic pain management, a program and certificate in mind-body medicine from Harvard Medical School that I think Shrey got maybe 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
He is able to integrate the principles of mindfulness meditation to teach patients and professionals on how they can better cope with chronic pain, stress, and burnout. So with all of that information, you now know he is well versed on having us, achieve happiness in 10 minutes a day. Thank you, Shrey, for joining us. I'm so excited to listen to the talk, and I'll hand it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Christine, for that very, very warm welcome. Much needed in cold days like this where I'm from right now in Toronto. It's been -15, -20, so that was a warm welcome, much needed. Thank you, Christine. We'll get right into it. I want you all to imagine a life like this. You're always content and happy with where you are. Nothing shakes you up. Even in rush hour traffic, you can remain perfectly calm. You love everyone around you unconditionally all the time. If you can imagine that, then you are probably a happy dog like this one right here. So I don't want to make any false promises in this talk. However, what I do want to share is a wonderful tool that can help us with just 10 minutes a day of practice, can help us become less stressed, happier, healthier, a little bit more kinder to ourselves and others, and ultimately more resilient with all the stress that comes our way in our modern, busy, chaotic lives. So, with today's talk, these are some of the things we're going to talk about. The tool that I was mentioning earlier is, of course, mindfulness meditation, which I'll share a key definition, which not many people um, really know or uh, have the wrong definition of. I will go through that. We'll talk about the 5 key benefits of mindfulness, especially as it's supported by the latest neuroscience in the current literature, especially on how it helps our physical as well as our mental health. Then we'll get into the 3 different ways that mindfulness can be practiced. And then at the end, we're going to practice a meditation together. As the title of this talk suggests, it takes 10 minutes, and we're going to do 10 minutes today. And for the next 10 weeks, we're going to do different types of meditations, which I'll get to later in the talk. I'll share one mini technique at the end that you can take away. It's called a mini mindfulness technique. We use it in the hospital system where we train other employees, and it's a wonderful trick and technique you can use anytime, anywhere. So with that in mind, I'll just do a quick intro. I know Christine has done a wonderful job of mentioning all the things that I've sort of done. It feels always weird to kind of hear it from that lens. But in 2011, I attended McMaster University. This is me, first year at Faculty Hollow. And the reason why I'm showing you this was a very well orchestrated photo. There's not a lot of meaning to it. There's not a lot of depth to it, really. I was just sitting there and I told a friend of mine to take a photo of me. Not very long after that, um, I ended up in the emergency department at Brampton Civic Hospital because I was severely in pain all over my back, There was no reason why. I wasn't sure what was happening. And I remember sitting there in the hospital thinking, I'm so young. What is happening to my back? Why am I having so much pain? Long story short, it ended up, I ended up going on this whole journey of different tests, MRI, CT scans, nerve studies, seeing different specialists, neurologists, rheumatologists, physicians, pain doctors, you name it, and then trying all different types of treatment to help my back pain. And ultimately, the good news was that there was nothing really wrong with my back. There was nothing really to say what's actually causing my pain. Unfortunately, the pain was still there. And I kind of took that as onto my own shoulders, thinking I had to do something about this. I can't live my life like this forever. And that was first year university. Around the same time is when I learned about mindfulness. And I didn't make much of it, to be honest. I was very skeptical. My professor, uh, I'm not sure if anyone has taken positive psychology with Dr. Richard Day. He was a fantastic professor. He was very animated, and I was very skeptical of mindfulness. Fast forward to now, almost 12 years later, on this journey, which I ultimately learned that I have a condition called fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain condition with no real cause and no real cure. Um, and over these years, I've relied on two main things to sort of help my health, my happiness, and my overall outlook on life. One of them has been exercise. It's been great, and I talk about that a lot. But the other piece that I didn't really realize much later on, and I wish I had listened to Dr. Day earlier when I started practicing mindfulness, and that has been a rock for me completely. It has changed the way um, I live my life. And 4 years ago, I founded my company called Mind Body Horizons with the mission of educating and inspiring others to adopt this wonderful practice. And today, I'm hoping I can do just that, even if I can convince you to try it out for yourself. So before I talk about what mindfulness is, I want to talk about what mindfulness is not. And there's a lot of definitions out there. If you Google it, you'll see lots of um, wild and false sort of definitions. So many people think, and these are all the myths out there, that mindfulness is a mystic practice only meant for Zen masters. Certainly not. We'll talk about it in a bit. People also wrongly believe that it's all about becoming calm. And that is a huge myth. It's certainly um, not calm at times. It can be uncomfortable. It can be difficult, just like exercise for our bodies. Mindfulness is the same thing for our minds. Um, it is not easy, but we can start at a place just 10 minutes a day and then work our way up. Another common myth is that it's religious or it has to do with religion. And although it started thousands of years ago from spiritual and religious institutions, nowadays it's a core part of modern medicine, which we'll uncover in just a bit. Mindfulness, people think, or meditation, think that people think that they can only do it if they are sitting down with their eyes closed. And I'll show you a type of mindfulness that you can do literally anywhere, anytime. Like I mentioned before, mindfulness is certainly not always relaxing, although it can be at times. The whole purpose of mindfulness is to embrace the discomfort and then see what comes out of it. And then this is a huge one. A lot of the people that I work with, they tell me that um, I can't practice meditation or mindfulness because I have too many thoughts, and they think that they have to stop every thought coming their way. Otherwise, they're doing it wrong. And that's certainly not true. The way I like to teach is, and the way my traditional mindfulness is viewing the thoughts coming your way without trying to stop them. And in that process, you become much, much more focused, more alert, and not attached to those thoughts. Mindfulness is certainly not hypnosis either. So what is mindfulness? And here's a wonderful definition by Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. He was the founder of the first mindfulness-based stress reduction program back in the 1980s. And this is what he says. He says mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally. And that's a lot. But what I did was I highlighted some of the key bolded words here that I'm going to explain to you, because if we don't hit any of these, or if we miss one of these concepts, we completely miss what mindfulness is. So I want to ask you, is your mind full or are you mindful? Now, here is a man on the left side. He's thinking about his wife, kids, lots of finances, a lot of stress, and there's a lot of stuff going on. His mind is pretty much full. But what he's not seeing is what's in front of him, the sun and the trees. And then on the right side, you have the dog. Remember that happy dog that I showed you earlier? That's that same happy dog. The dog is seeing the sun, the trees, and that's about it. And essentially, I'm going to show you um, through, oops, this is kind of hiding my slideshow here. Let me just move that. The four key elements of what makes mindfulness through this exact example. So mindfulness is about awareness, right? And the way you can think about it is the opposite of autopilot mode of living. We are so used to this go, go, go lifestyle, going from one place to another, doing tasks, adding endless things on our to-do lists, that we are completely on this autopilot mode of living where we're not really aware of our surroundings, of what we're doing, where we are in our relationship to the people around us. So awareness is crucial, and the dog is very aware of the surroundings, right? Second is paying attention. And think about in our modern life, there are thousands of things stealing our attention or trying to steal our attention, right? And we get pulled from, uh, emails to text messages to social media to the news. Our attention is a prime resource for so many companies out there, and their job is to take that. And mindfulness is about learning how to cultivate your attention so that it can work for you, right? So far we covered awareness of what's around us, what's happening, paying attention, and choosing what you pay attention to. So the dog is paying attention to the sun and the trees. Perfect. The third element is present moment living. And you hear this a lot, right? I want to be more present. But what does that exactly mean? It comes down to two things. Can you not get too caught up in the worries of the future? And are you able to let go of regrets or guilt from the past? And it's not
Oops, sorry.
possible. Whoops. All good, Christine?
Yep, sorry, I think maybe you froze there.
Oh, I think we're good, hopefully. So present moment is about um, not getting caught up in the future and not getting too caught up in the past. It's being here and now. And the fourth element of mindfulness, and I think this is the one that gets missed all the time, is non-judgmental living. And what this is about is, can you be okay with the good, the bad, the ugly, and can you somewhat stay neutral and accept your situation is for what it is? In this scenario, the dog is not thinking, oh my gosh, it's so hot outside, or oh, look at the trees look this way, or the dog is not thinking about plans of the future or the past. It's the dog is here in this present moment, not judging or adding extra analysis to what is going on. So these four key elements make mindfulness mindfulness. And there are different practices to cultivate each one of these elements. Now, I just want to take you back through history just briefly to understand where mindfulness came from in today's world. Like I mentioned earlier, it does come from Eastern religious and spiritual institutions. And one of the founding fathers of mindfulness, his name was Thich Nhat Hanh. He was a Vietnamese monk. He took the teachings of early on Buddhism and he made it available and understandable for the everyday person. He held lots of retreats all over the world, and one of his students was Dr. John Kabat-Zinn. He was a physician in Boston, and he created the very first mindfulness-based stress reduction program in 1979. And he wrote a book about it. He did this program for patients with chronic stress, anxiety, depression, cancer, chronic pain that was not treatable by quote unquote Western medicine. And the findings were astonishing. He published it and it sort of took off. Since the 1980s to about now, running into 2025, mindfulness has just exploded anywhere, everywhere, in all sorts of industries. And these are this graph just shows you the number of journal articles um, looking at mindfulness. And the reason why they're looking at it is because they're finding benefits and positive um, uh, improvements in lots of different conditions. And I'm going to show you a huge study from 2021 that looked at 419 different studies and trials, and their main task was to find out what is one of the best interventions for our mental well-being. So they looked at things like cognitive behavior therapy, acceptance commitment therapy, other behavior therapies, positive psychology interventions, and mindfulness. And there were over 50,000 participants in this whole study, and they looked at both clinical and non-clinical populations. And what they found was, along with positive psychology interventions, mindfulness-based interventions had the greatest increases in mental well-being. And not only that, they looked at three different groups, people who were mentally ill, people who were physically ill, and the general population. And what they found was that mindfulness is one of the only ones that generated the increased effects on all three domains. So what that shows us that mindfulness is here to stay. It's grounded in research, and it is one of the best things we have for our well-being in the sense of our mental well-being, our physical well-being. And I'll take you through some of the other key factors of our health that improve with mindfulness. And there are five. There are many out. There are a lot of other things that improve with mindfulness, but for this talk, I want to talk about the five. So number one, and this is one of the main reasons why mindfulness based stress reduction was created, was to tackle this epidemic of chronic stress. Now, when you look at stress, you have to ask yourself, is it really that bad? For our ancestors, I'm talking about 10,000, 20,000 years ago, it was great, and it still is a good response for our bodies. Our bodies need stress to um, fight, flight, or freeze, essentially to fight off predators for our survival and be safe. For our ancestors, it was short bouts of stress for primarily for survival. As soon as that saber-toothed tiger or another predator was gone or they ran away from it, their levels of stress went back to homeostasis or a baseline, and they were able to carry on with their life. But in this modern world, where for the most part, we are not dealing with survival, but our minds are sort of stuck in this kind of discrepancy. We have the minds of our ancestors in a modern world where there are so many sources of stress, and many people get stuck in this cycle of chronic stress. So the bottom line is stress is not bad for you, especially especially if it's short periods. It's actually good for you. It's a good response for us. When it gets bad is when it gets unchecked and when it becomes chronic. That is what leads to so many different symptoms that we see in our body. So these are some of them. These are some symptoms of chronic stress that I see in my patients, in employees that I work with. Um, as you can see, headaches, body aches, muscle tension, upset stomach, constant worrying or racing thoughts, chest pain, feeling nervous, frustrated, overwhelmed, dry mouth, difficulty swallowing, inability to focus or sleep. So you see that stress is not just something that affects our mental well-being, it has very real physical effects on our body. But the good news is that mindfulness is at this current moment one of the best things we have to tackle stress. And studies show that there is an area in our brains called the amygdala, which is the area of stress and fear. Studies have shown that with 8 weeks of mindfulness training, activation of that area, the amygdala, is reduced in just 8 weeks. And this always blows my mind because the act of mindfulness you will get a chance to practice together is we're not doing anything profound, right? We're focusing on an anchor or our breath, for example. And when our minds wander, we come back to our breath over and over and over again. And just this three-step model, which I'll show you in a bit, can have real effects in our physiology and our brain chemistry. It really rewires and changes our brains. And if you think about it, it's the autopilot of mode of living is what causes a lot of stress for us. And mindfulness is what turns that off and makes us more aware, more present, and that's what turns off all the high stress levels. The second way in which mindfulness helps our bodies physically is that it can improve our heart health. The American Heart Association released a statement a couple of years ago, actually. They said, looking at lots of studies out there, they said, while research remains preliminary, there is enough evidence to suggest mindfulness as an adjunct treatment for coronary or heart disease and its prevention. And as a practicing physiotherapist in the hospital systems at Toronto Western Hospital, mindfulness is a staple in our chronic pain programs, but even in other programs, cardiac rehab, transplant units, mindfulness programs are literally everywhere. And we'll go through it in just a bit on how mindfulness actually improves our heart rate. It lowers our blood pressure as well. And in general, bottom line is regular meditation lowers the risk of heart disease, diabetes, and stroke. That's 10 minutes a day. The third way in which mindfulness helps our health is our cognitive health. So just a few slides ago, I showed you how the amygdala, that area of that is responsible for stress and fear, changes in its activation. There's another area called hippocampus, and studies have shown that this area has increased in its gray matter concentration with meditation, between 8 to 10 weeks of meditation for this specific study. And that's sort of, again, whenever I think about it, it really, it just shocks me because just like when we exercise our bodies, we're building muscle, which we can see, right? Over time, if you lift a certain amount of weights or if you do a certain amount of cardio, you see physical changes in yourself. You see it in the mirror. But this sort of practice, sort of like invisible, but it's having real impacts on our brain. There's actual thickening of certain areas. And what this thickening is not just, oh yeah, there's increased gray matter concentration, but what does that actually mean? Because that area is responsible for these three things: attention and focus, improved learning, and improved memory. And these are vital functions of our brain that, especially as we age, after, ages 50s and 60s, studies show that brain health sort of gradually declines. Mindfulness helps to preserve our brain health for longer and longer. All right. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting and very um, personal and hits home to me, because this is what started my journey with mindfulness. I got into mindfulness because of pain. I had chronic pain. Um, and ultimately, while I was studying at University of Toronto, I learned that there are studies to support mindfulness for pain. So I've sort of taken that. I studied further at University of Toronto in mindfulness-based chronic pain management, and I've looked at lots of studies. And there was one really, really cool study that sort of exactly explains how mindfulness can help physical pain, because that concept never made sense to me. Like, how can this actually work? So what they did was they looked at Zen meditators who have had experience with meditation for many, many years, and they found that they had a lower pain sensitivity. Essentially, what that meant was they had a higher tolerance for pain. And, fine and cool. But when they looked at their brains through functional MRI studies, they found that there were actual differences in their neural pathways compared to the control groups. And what they found was that there are two areas of our brain. One is the sensory area of our brain. I'm just going to pretend that this is the sensory area of our brain. And then the other area, which is the cognitive and evaluative area of our brain. So sensory here, cognitive and evaluative area here. What they found was that in long-term Zen meditators, these two areas had lower connectivity. And what that meant, I'm going to go to the next slide here. What that meant was meditators can feel and sense the pain in their sensory areas, but they don't add any more analysis, thoughts, evaluations, or judgments of their pain. So they feel it as it is without adding these extra layers. And this perfectly is explained by this, what we call the onion model of pain. You have pain at the bottom, and then you have these layers. And this doesn't have to be just pain. I'm talking about any health condition, illness, that you're dealing with, any specific dilemmas or scenarios that we're dealing with. You have the problem at the lowest level, but then our brains, which are really powerful, especially that um, thinking brain, it adds a lot of layers and layers of thoughts, emotions, and suffering to that problem or that pain. What mindfulness does is it sort of peels those layers away one by one by one. And as I've highlighted at the bottom here, with mindfulness, we're reducing extra layers of dread, worry, stress, emotions, and the suffering that can be associated with the pain or an illness or a condition of any sort. So that's a lot, I know. But this, I hope that kind of makes sense, because this can get very, very confusing. But this is what has helped me take control of my fibromyalgia pain and all the worries and the stresses and emotions that come along with that. And there are studies to back that. For chronic low back pain, mindfulness has been shown in one study to actually beat painkillers and usual care. And it was actually more cost effective as well. And now some really, really cool research, and this is the fifth way mindfulness impacts our health, is that there has been some talks of some age-defying effects of meditation. This particular study looked at brain gray matter in general, overall. As we age, gray matter typically reduces, and that, corresponds with our mental sharpness, our focus, attention, memory, learning, all of that. But what they found was that people who meditate long term, their decline of that gray matter was lower. So there was some protective effects of meditation in slowing down that decline. Again, that is just phenomenal. Um, and no pun intended, it is why mindfulness, in my opinion, is a no-brainer to add into in some way or another. We'll talk about different ways in just a bit, but in one way or another, we need to consider mindfulness in our overall health and well-being. Another study looked at telomeres. Essentially, what these are we have chromosomes in our cells, right? And at the end of them, we have these regions called telomeres, and they're known to be a biological marker of aging, or what they call it, the molecular clock. The bigger that telomere is, the younger you are, essentially. As we age and as cells divide and, we go through, life, these telomeres get shorter and shorter and shorter. Sometimes they like to compare telomeres to the plastic tip of shoelaces. It's like kind of like that protective piece at the end of a shoelace, which tells us how, young or old a shoelace or a shoe can be, right? Essentially. And what they have found in general is that things like smoking, poor diet, lack of physical activity, and chronic stress can increase the rate of those telomeres getting shorter and shorter with age. They get shorter regardless, but that the rate at which they get shorter is increased with these unhealthy behaviors. And what they found is that with mindfulness meditation, from the stress level, when we reduce stress, it has a protective effect on our telomere length and ultimately our cellular age, or our molecular age. And again, that's very, very fascinating. So overall, these are the 5 ways mindfulness improves our physical and mental health. It reduces stress, which is a huge, and I would say, if there was one that you could highlight or pick from, it would be that, because that impacts everything else. So it reduces stress, it improves our heart health, it boosts our cognitive health, can preserve our DNA, which can slow down the aging process, reduces physical pain. These are the top 5 factors that improve. Now, all that is good. The science is there, the literature is there, but that's just half the story, right? The other half, the missing piece of the puzzle now is, how do you practice it? And there are 3 ways that you can practice mindfulness meditation. And like I had mentioned earlier, people mostly and wrongly think that you have to do mindfulness meditation sitting with your eyes closed, right? And that's just the first way of doing it. That is called formal practice through meditation. Think of this form as a structured, guided way of doing a mental exercise. You have a 5 minute or a 10 minute, 15 minute, 20 minute uh, chunk of time where you're doing a focused, formal practice of mindfulness. And there are different types, right? You can focus on your breath, which is typically the uh, most beginner friendly or the easiest way to follow, but it doesn't have to be the breath. You could do things like what we call a body scan, where you're focusing on areas of your body as a focus tool. You could do sound meditation, so you use a sound to kind of help you focus. There's a version called mindful movement meditation, which in our series we're actually going to go through these types of meditations. There's mindful movement meditation, which is my absolute personal favorite. This is what's kind of bridged the gap between physical and mental health for me, that mindful movement. And essentially, we're using sensations of our body as a focusing tool rather than our breath. And then there's visualization, kindness meditations. There's a whole bunch. And you can think of all of these different types of formal practices as different types of physical exercises, right? If you, um, we know that there's strengthening exercises for our bodies, there's cardio, there's balance exercises, there's flexibility and stretching, and each impacts our physical health in one way or another. The same applies to mindfulness meditation. All these different types of meditations have a different effect on our mental well-being and our brains. So they're all important. So that is formal practice, and we're going to do that in just a minute or two. The second type of mindfulness practice is called informal practice. This is during everyday activities. This is essentially turning off that autopilot mode of living. And studies have shown that our mind is on autopilot 47% of the time. That's half the time. And it's not bad, but we can often get caught up in this and not realize what we're doing. So, my ask for you is pick one activity that you do in your day. It could be the most mundane activity. Washing dishes, brushing your teeth, eating are some examples. Um, and turn that into a mindful activity. Essentially, doing that activity as if you're doing it for the first time, as if you were a child who has never seen this or done it before. And that's a way to practice mindfulness in a real life setting, and it works wonders. You can practice mindfulness while talking to someone, while walking as well. And we'll go through that in the series later on. And then the third way is mini mindfulness technique. I'll share with you one technique at the end of this session today. I'm not going to go through this just for the interest of time, but we are going to get into our um, formal guided meditation practice. This is a combination of a breathing and a body scan to de-stress and re-energize our minds. So what I'm going to ask everyone to do, if you've done this before, um, you can get into your sort of routine or your setup. But for those of you who have not practiced meditation before, get into a comfortable, alert position for your body where you're not going to fall asleep. So you could be sitting, you could be lying down, but make sure you don't get too comfortable, like putting a blanket over yourself or something like that. I've done that and I've fallen asleep. It's normal. But for this practice, we want to be awake and alert. So find a seat. I'm going to be on my chair. My feet are on the ground. My hands are on my lap or by the side. So you can place them on the armrest. You can bring your hands together or apart, whatever feels comfortable. And I'm going to guide you through step by step. This is going to be roughly a 10-minute practice. And let's start. Welcome to this breathing and body scan practice. This guided meditation can be useful when you are feeling overly stressed, worried, or overwhelmed. A meditation like this can also help to calm the mind and relax the body, especially in challenging situations. So let's begin by settling in to our comfortable position. changing your posture just slightly so to wake up, becoming more alert. Your back is straight but not rigid. Shoulders are down and relaxed. Hands are on your lap or by your side. And if you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and gently close your eyes. You may also keep them open with a soft gaze. And we'll begin with a few slow and deep breaths. So following my lead, taking a deep inhale in through the nose, holding it just for a second, and then breathing out through the nose or mouth all the way. Slowly, mindfully. One more breath in through the nose, holding it at the top, and then slowly breathing out. This time, allowing the muscles in your body to just relax slightly. One more breath in through the nose, hold, and breathing out. And one last breath here. In, hold, and exhale, allowing your body to just get a little bit heavier. Now, allowing the rhythm of your breathing to become natural, not trying to change your breath in any way. Seeing if you can let go of any noises, distractions, any plans, problems. Letting go of the need to be anywhere else other than here with yourself and your body. And we'll begin by turning our attention inwards into our body by first focusing on the areas around our head and face. Noticing if there is any tension over your eyebrows, your cheeks, your forehead. With each breath out, seeing if you can just relax these areas, making them slightly softer. Letting go of any tension around your eyes, your neck, your shoulders, relaxing your jaw, and relaxing your entire face. And just being here for a few moments without any responsibilities, without any additional stresses. And while you're here, going to step one and seeing what is going on in your mind and body right now. Are there any thoughts? Are there any feelings? Are there any sensations in your body? Any coolness, warmth that you feel? Not changing or wishing things were different, just becoming aware of what's already here. Maybe noticing your feet on the ground or the surface that you're on. noticing your back being supported by the chair or wherever you are, and noticing the ground holding your feet up. And now shifting your focus to your breath, narrowing your spotlight on the sensations of your breath at your belly or your nostrils, wherever you feel it the most. Noticing the sensation of the inhale for its full duration, and noticing the out breath for its full duration. You might notice the air entering your nose as slightly cooler compared to when you breathe out. The air might feel slightly warmer at your nose. If your mind starts to wander at any time, just noticing where it has gone and then simply bring it back to your breath. Now, as we slowly come to the end of this practice, expand your awareness away from the breath to your whole body, noticing the breath moving through your body. You might feel yourself and your body rising as you inhale. You might notice your body slightly falling as you exhale. Becoming aware of your posture, your facial expression, maybe noticing the sensations on the surface of your skin, and feeling this rising and falling of your chest and belly, and holding in all of these sensations right now just as they are. And now taking one deep breath, following my lead, taking a deep inhale in through the nose, and then letting go of the air and breathing out at your own pace all the way. When you're ready, you can gently add movement back into your body, maybe wiggling your fingers, wiggling your toes, and opening your eyes, noticing how your body and your mind feel now. Maybe lighter, maybe heavier, whatever it may be. Just thanking yourself for spending the last 10 minutes to take care of your health, of your mind, and your body. So I'll welcome you all back to our talk. I hope you enjoyed that practice. Just have a couple more slides before we open it up to questions. What we did right now was just one example of a formal practice through meditation. That was, like I mentioned, combination of breath awareness and body scan. In the series, we'll do different types, looking at mindful movements, imagery, kindness, things like that. Now, I want to share with you one mini mindfulness technique, something you can start doing right away, something I share with a lot of the employees and patients I work with. It's called the stop and pause. You can take a screenshot of this or do what you need to do, take a photo of it, but essentially it's the acronym STOP. So S is for stop for a moment and pause. T is taking 3 to 5 slow, deep, and long breaths, just like we did during this meditation. O is for observing your thoughts. So, what am I thinking? Emotions, what am I feeling? And the body sensations in your body, whatever it may be. And then P is proceeding mindfully, or sometimes I like to say wisely, with your day without judging any of the above thoughts, emotions, or body sensations. And this STOP is a very quick and powerful way to escape that autopilot mode of living. You can do it anytime, anywhere. You can use it when you're about to have a difficult or challenging situation, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you have an important meeting or conversation during or before a presentation. I did this right before today's presentation. You can do it in between meetings, busy places like airports, grocery stores, malls. Works really well when you have a couple of minutes and your mind is wandering. So overall, um, there are some key messages and takeaways from this presentation or this talk that I'd like to leave you with, and I'll share a quote with you. But number one, mindfulness meditation is no longer considered a complementary or alternative medicine. And what's funny is when I was at McMaster in my first year, um, around that time is when mindfulness started becoming really, really popular and sort of being thrown everywhere in the scientific literature. And at that time, there were journal articles considering it complementary or alternative medicine, but now it's a core part of modern medicine. Number two, mindfulness is one of the most effective tools in helping manage our stress, um, like I mentioned throughout this talk. Number three, through neuroplasticity, which is our brains changing or rewiring with mindfulness, we can become happier, healthier, sharper, and more resilient. And it takes as little as 10 minutes of practice per day to see the benefits. So here's a quote to end off our talk. And I love this. This has sort of been my go-to throughout life in general. You can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Essentially, what Dr. John Kabat-Zinn is saying here is you can't really stop the ups and downs of life, challenges, dilemmas, um, difficulties, hardships, but you can learn through tools like mindfulness meditation to live with them, um, grow from them, and be more resilient to whatever comes your way. So I hope you enjoyed this talk. Um, I think I talked a lot more than I wanted to because I was hoping to have at least 10, 15 minutes for question and answers. But I'm going to tune in to the chat because Christine is piling all the questions from the YouTube. Is that right,
Yeah,
Christine?
that's right. And it's okay, Shrey. I think I speak on behalf of everyone. We love listening to your dulcet tones.
Yeah, thank you.
Love listening to you speak. Yeah,
Appreciate that,
so
Christine.
let's go with so there was when people have pre-submitted the question, you
Hmm.
kind of talked a little bit about it, but establishing a long-term habit, right? So you've
Yeah,
made it quite clear that it doesn't have to be an hour of sitting on
yeah,
the mat. So
that's right.
how would you suggest people establish that daily habit? Because you talked about its consistency that really is important if you
Hmm.
see all of those benefits.
That's right. So a couple of notes there. And this goes with any long-term habit, right? Whether it be exercise, uh, eating well, sleeping well, it's to start small, right? And sometimes I like to suggest just starting with as little as 2 minutes of meditation or mindfulness or using that stop and pause technique. Even if you just did that once a day and give yourself 2 weeks and then 4 weeks. So that'll be kind of your benchmarks. 2 weeks is to sort of get into a habit. By 4 weeks, so th almost 30 days, that habit is becoming more of a routine. And research suggests that if you can stick to a habit for 90 days, and that could be, like I said, mentioned it could be as little as 2 minutes a day. If you can stick to something for 90 days straight, that habit has become a part of your life and your routine, and it's going to be much harder to break out of. So that would be my sort of advice. Start small. It doesn't have to be long, but just stick to it and pick a time and a day where you know this is my time. So for example, it could be first thing you do in the morning or the thing you do at nighttime. For me, I do my mindful movement meditation right before I sleep. And that is my cue that, before I get into bed, I need to do this. And I've been doing that for years. So um, yeah, pick something small, an achievable goal, and stick with it as best you can. If you falter, it's fine, things come up, but just get right back on the path. Try to hit that 90 days.
90 days is key. Okay, thank you
Yeah.
for that. So a couple of questions that have
Mhm.
come in. So John wanted to know, you talked about the telomeres, right? So they get reduced
Mhm.
as we age. So he wanted to know, with stress reduction, will the telomeres regenerate?
So don't, and I'll need to look back at those studies in detail. And I can't give you the exact answer to that, but I don't think that's what the research found. They didn't find that they can regenerate or grow longer. What they did find was that they can slow down the decline or the deterioration of it, if that makes sense. And it sort of goes to show you that stress, especially very high levels of stress, can be very detrimental to our health, especially when you look at uh, childhood stress. So if you have faced um, extreme stress through childhood, um, that can have very difficult, challenging kind of scenarios later on in life. And there's a lot of research to show that there's a huge childhood adverse studies, and that's what they found. But I guess my point is that the earlier we can adopt these healthy habits of managing our stress levels, our mental health, our physical health, the better for our age. But it's never too late.
That's
Yeah,
key. Never too late.
never too late. Yeah,
That's right. I love that thing that you said, potential age-defying effects.
right. Yeah.
That's why I practice mindfulness.
Hey,
Well,
there you
and
go.
sorry, before getting into John's question, when that person had asked, a couple people had actually put it in the pre-submitted questions about
Mhm.
establishing a mindfulness habit. Well, they could join our Friday
Yeah, there
mindfulness
you
at
go. I
twelve
didn't even.
fifteen, right?
There
Because
you
then
go.
every
Perfect.
Friday at 12:15, you're dedicated to your mindfulness.
You got it.
Um, I'm aware of the time, so there were two other questions. I want to
Yeah,
get
of
to those
course.
in the people who submitted them. So Sue comments, I have great difficulty both falling asleep and staying asleep. What would you recommend for those frustrating, stressful times?
Yeah, those are good questions. From this is outside of my mindfulness meditation sort of hat, but I'll put on the hat of a healthcare professional. When it comes to sleep, there are, they call it sleep hygiene tips. And typically, when you are having trouble falling asleep, and if you're in bed, one of the first things that uh, therapists or sleep therapists suggest is to get out of bed. So try not to stay in bed if you're having um, a challenging time in in that moment, because what's happening is you're linking your bed to a time of stress and worry, and that's what you want to sort of avoid. So what you want to try to do in those moments is to get out of bed and do your set a time for stress and worry elsewhere, not in your bed. And the more you sort of um, de-link that, the better it will be to fall asleep in bed and stay asleep. Also, and then putting my mindfulness hat back on, when you do practice mindfulness meditation long term, it can improve your quality of sleep. And they found that through studies as well. It doesn't increase the number of hours you get of sleep at night, but improves the quality of it. So I would suggest practice mindfulness meditation regularly and it can help you with your stress and it can help you with your sleep as well.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. Sylvia's asking, hopefully she's still watching. Would you be able to show the second last slide again with the
Of
4 points just before the quote?
course. Right here. Yeah.
There we go. Core part of modern medicine. Right. There we go. So that
Yeah.
is Sylvia, the key messages and takeaways.
Key messages. Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
And maybe we'll just leave that. So let's tackle the last question,
Hmm.
which is from Phyllis. And she asked, how can I achieve happiness and health with a debilitating physical condition? Long COVID means I can't tolerate exercise. Oh, Phyllis, that's
Yeah.
awful. You have long COVID.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah. And that is a really, really good question. And I don't have the perfect or the best answer for that. Um, One of the things about mindfulness, it tells us that we can't really force happiness. And, you know, and I'm just gonna use myself as an example. Again, I'm not trying to compare my health with anyone's else's health or their physical conditions, but I hope me sharing this can give you some insight. But when I try to force myself through um, fibromyalgia, force myself to be more happy and be positive, it actually backfired. It made me more stress, more pain, and it made matters worse. And one of the things in mindfulness meditation, especially when it comes to health, we try to say is what you resist persists. So there are certain things we sort of don't accept in a sense. And again, that's a very tough, and it's a tough thing to say for me, even without really getting to know your health and your condition in detail. But um, there's some elements of acceptance of the difficulty and the challenge that you're facing, and then seeing if you can make some level of peace with that and being more present in that moment, learning how you can best, um, the best actions you can do in that moment. And exercise, and like you mentioned, in terms of long COVID, yeah, it is tough. There are certain conditions like long COVID, post-fatigue syndrome, um, fibromyalgia, certain types of it, where exercise is not tolerated. But sometimes you have to find the right type. It could be simple sitting stretches and breathing exercises. Sometimes it might be getting into a pool where it's more tolerable. Sometimes it's biking. Again, everyone is different. So I hope that answers your question. That was a long sort of answer, but yeah, sorry. Couldn't hear you there, Christine.
Oh, sorry, but it was a good answer. Yeah, I think my
Yeah.
audio's bad. And I think I'm
Yeah.
having, sorry, everyone, I think I'm having some internet problems. I keep saying your connection is
Hmm.
is not very stable. So
Yeah.
maybe that's a hint that I should just wrap up the the
Yeah.
webinar. Um,
Yeah.
but Shrey, do you want to do a little plug for the talks? Like, do you want to talk a little bit about if people wanted to join us Fridays at 12:15
Hmm.
Eastern? Talk a little bit about what
That's
they
right.
can expect for those of
Yeah.
not familiar.
Of course. So, like Christine mentioned, for the last 4 years, 4 to 5 years, we've been doing these series of what we call Mindful Fridays. So, at lunchtime on Fridays, 12:15 Eastern Time, it's 15 minutes. So, sort of like an intro. I'll sort of introduce you to a practice that we're going to work on. We could do it. We would do a 10-minute meditation together, and there will be different types for each week. And then at the end, I'll share a quote with you and then give you some homework to do for the rest of the week. And every week will be sort of keeping each other accountable as a group, right? And there's power in that, right? Um, when you see people online, when you see people, doing it together, there's this sort of inclination that I want to continue on. And that sort of helps build that long-term habit. It helps me as well. So I'd love for each and every one of you to be there and we can practice mindfulness together for the next 10 weeks. And you, Christine, you mentioned tomorrow is the first one, right?
It
12:15?
is.
Look at that.
Tomorrow is the first one.
Yeah.
And we should let people know too that if they can't attend, first of all,
Mm,
you don't have to attend. If you sign up, you don't have to attend every single
that's
one.
right.
Sometimes you get busy.
Good
Uh,
point.
but we do record them. So if you do register for the series, which of course is free because everything's free online for
Yeah.
us from us, we do send out a recording later in the afternoon so you can continue using that practice throughout the week. And then we build a little library. So at the end,
Mm,
you have 10 different types of mindfulness practices that you can use. And I would hazard a guess that many of our followers probably go back and listen to them, right?
mhm.
So because we don't do we do these series sort of a couple times a year. So we don't do it every Friday, but
Right.
you have the recordings so you can always do them every Friday if you want.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully that's a good plug for everyone who wanted
Love
to
it.
come and join us on Fridays.
Perfect. I love that, Christine. And then can we also give a round of applause for Christine and McMaster Alumni Group? Dave is also here in the background. This is fantastic, work to sort of um, make this accessible, right? Uh, to people, all the McMaster alumni out there. So thank you, Christine. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, McMaster alumni, for having me and for having everyone else here.
Oh, well, thank you, Shrey. Well,
Hmm.
mindfulness has really changed my life. I'm a practitioner, and it's because of Shrey that I am.
Hey, look at that. Yeah. I'm happy to hear that, Christine. You're too kind.
Well, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
maybe Dave, since we mentioned you, Dave, would you be able to put up that slide? So if anyone has a phone there, you can whip out your phone. We have a QR code. There we go. And so you can register for our series.
Oh,
And I'll
perfect. Look at
also
that.
include that in the follow-up email that you'll be getting in a couple of hours. So
That
with
sounds
that, sorry,
perfect.
gang, it's now 8, a little after 8. So we will let you go. So thank you so much, Shrey, for joining us and teach us about mindfulness. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hopefully, you now understand the benefits of mindfulness, and you'll want to, join with us, or maybe just start a practice on your own, starting off with 2 minutes, and then, maybe working up, and maybe, in a couple of years, you'll be one of those people who's there sitting on a cushion for an hour.
Oh, look at that. There.
Very zen.
I
So
love
thank you,
that.
Shrey. I look
All
forward
right.
to seeing you tomorrow.
Likewise. Thanks, Christine. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.